Okay, welcome. It is November 7th, 2024, Goffstown Budget Committee. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Samantha, would you like to start with a roll call?
Sure. Samantha Kern. Laura Stevens.
Ryan Mazer.
Mark Bernard.
Jared Talbot, School Board Rep.
Joe Alexander.
Frank Hobbs.
Kelly Boyer, Select Board Rep.
Elizabeth DeBrule.
Israel Carey.
Peter Grigorakakis.
Olivia Welch-Erdahl.
Richard Manzo.
And we have Danielle and Derek here for staff support. So I want to welcome Mark to the committee. He is the replacement for Richard Fletcher, so welcome. Hopefully you're, I said it's a good you're here now so that, you know, we have town presentations and we have deliberations and stuff, but dive right into it, so welcome.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So we're gonna, is there anyone here for public comment?
I actually, Joe, I have something, but I don't want to speak on behalf of the Select Board, so I'm going to
Sure,
do
go
it as
ahead.
public comment, if that's okay. For the purposes of GTV. I'm not Scott right now. I apologize in advance. I've been very sick, and bear with me because I've been creaky all day. So like I said, my name is Kelly Boyer, 22 Gorham Pond Road. While I'm at the Select Board Rep to the Budget Committee, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, so I just want to make that clear designation. Good evening, Budget Committee members. Last year I watched with disappointment as some Budget Committee members chose to speak poorly about the budgets, town departments, schools, administrators, and warrant articles. Seeing individuals participate in a campaign to vote down the budget and spread information on social media was disheartening. While I wholeheartedly respect the right to personal opinion, this room is where we are supposed to turn those thoughts into tangible ideas and real actions for voters. Tonight, I hope to help realign for the upcoming budget season by reminding everyone of our collective responsibility. As an SB2 town in New Hampshire, we operate under the official ballot referendum system. This means that the majority of decisions, including the budget, are not made here or at traditional town meeting, but by the voters via ballot. Our task is not simply to critique a budget presented by the Select Board or the School Board. What we work on here, what we present to the taxpayer, is the Budget Committee's budget. Our role in this process is crucial through reviews and recommending budgets, holding public hearings, preparing the official budget, through warrant articles. In addition to the central budgets, we also review recommended financial warrant articles. They can include capital projects or significant town purchases. Finally, to provide clear information, to ensure that our budget recommendations are clear, transparent, and thoroughly explained so voters can make informed decisions. The budget presented in March will directly result from the work we do in this room. It's the chair's responsibility to guide us through this process, but each of us must participate fully and meaningfully. As we begin this new year, I ask each of you to show the courage and integrity needed to ask tough questions. If you believe in a tax cap, just voting no to show it is not tangible, you need to show everyone how it can work. If you think we can lower the tax burden, come to the table with ideas and strategies that we can discuss and implement. This committee is built for collaboration and problem solving, but if we are only willing to contribute our best efforts. It is not the responsibility of the department heads or school administrators to cut their own budgets. That's our job. If you believe there's wasteful spending, lines to cut, or inefficiencies, speak up and offer solutions. No one in this room is unwilling to listen if the ideas are constructive. The one thing I can't tolerate is watching members sit back, do nothing, and then criticize those who are genuinely trying to problem solve. That behavior isn't productive and not what our residents elected us to do. Lastly, I ask that we exercise professionalism in all that we do here at this table. I'm asking that we agree to keep cell phones off the table during meetings, barring emergencies. This is a matter of respect for each other, our presenters, the work we do, for our staff, and the community we serve. We all hold positions of influence, and we can shape the future of our town. I challenge each of you to rise to the occasion, buckle up, and commit to doing the hard work required of us. Goffstown is counting on us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, that was hard for me to get through, so I'm sure it was hard to listen to.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Is there anyone else here for public comment? Seeing none, we're going to close public comment. Next up, approval of minutes. We have 10 sets of minutes. Has everyone had the opportunity to review them? They should be online, posted. It's just one sheet of paper, really. They're
Yeah.
like written in.
So are we gonna approve them as a group or individually?
Individually.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay, and I have a list of people who were there or not there for the meetings.
that was my follow-up
Yeah, so
question.
if the committee's okay, I'm okay, like, reading the names of the people that that may want to abstain, if you can't remember when you showed up, which tour you were there for. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, meeting of 6/18/2024, that was a actual meeting, budget meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Brian, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Laura. Allison and Doug were excused that day. Oh, no, hold on, I'm sorry. I got it. Doug was absent and Mark wasn't here. So all those in favor of the meeting, or the minutes, please raise your hand. Those opposed, abstentions? Mark? And, okay, Doug's not here. All right, next up is August 20th, 2024. That was the tour of the Goffstown Public Library. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Brian, second by
Second.
Laura. All those in, any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed, abstentions? Me, Samantha, Mark, Jared, abstain.
Hold on one second, Joe. You said it was you, Samantha,
Yep. Jared, Mark.
Jared, and Mark. Okay.
Okay, next up is 8/22/24. That was a tour of the Town Hall and Grassmere Town Hall. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Brian, second by Laura. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions?
Right.
Kelly Boyer, Joe Alexander, Jared Talbot, Mark Renaud.
Renaud or Renaud?
Renaud. Okay, that's good.
Renaud.
Thank you. Okay, motion passes. Next up is August 27, 2024. That's the tour of the fire station. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Brian, second by Laura. Any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Jared, Peter, Richard? Okay, Richard and Mark.
I was, yeah, checking the date again.
All right, that motion is approved. There's approval minutes of August 29th, that's the tour of Bartlett and Maple Ave. Motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Brian, second by Laura.
I wasn't there.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Elizabeth. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Olivia Welch Ordell, Laura Stevens, Mark Renaud, and Jared Talbot abstain. Motion's approved. All right, we have a tour of Glen Lake and Mountain View Middle School. Is there a motion to approve? That's on September 5th.
So moved.
Approved by Brian, second by Laura. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Abstentions? Elizabeth DeBrule, Peter Gregorikakis, Samantha Kearns, Mark Renaud, Joe Alexander abstain. Motion passes. The next up is September 11th, tour of DPW. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Brian to approve.
Second.
Second by Laura. Discussion. All those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Elizabeth DeBrule, Joe Alexander, Mark Renaud, Jared Talbot, Richard Manzo. Motion passes. Next up is a tour of Goffstown High School, 9/17.
So moved.
Motion by Brian, second by Laura.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Elizabeth DeBrule, Jared Talbot, Mark Renaud. Motion passes, the minutes are approved. And then next up is a tour of Goffstown Police Department. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Brian, second by
Second.
Laura. Any discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Kelly Boyer, Joe Alexander, Jared Talbot, and Mark Renaud. And then we have 10:15. It's on the next page. Yeah, okay. 10:15, tour of Parks and Rec. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Brian, second by
Second.
Laura. Any discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Richard Manzo, Elizabeth DeBoer, Mark Reno, Jared Talbot. All right, I think that's all of them. So all the minutes are approved now, up until today. Okay, next up on the agenda, Sam, are you ready to present?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to call on Samantha Kearns to, you can just stay right there, just present on your work over the summer on the Capital Improvement Committee.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha. I was your capital improvement projects representative. This is my second year doing it. It was so much fun. It's such an honor to do it. I would do it again. I love it. So I know first off, the capital improvements project, we come up with a matrix of capital improvements projects. We work with the planning board. The matrix is a tool for planning. It's not a budget matrix. So in going there, just picking the first one on here, if the police station is like, hey, we want to replace, all of our police cruisers, I don't say like, oh, wow, that seems really expensive, that's not my job to fight with them about the money in that moment, okay? It's kind of to lessen the tax impact across years so that there's not one year with a giant tax impact. So with that being said, do you want me to go through each of the departments of what is on?
Do we have the matrix?
Yes, it should be.
Is it in this?
It's in the binder?
It's in your binder.
It's in
Yeah,
your
it should be
binder
on, like, the
behind tab
last-
number 5.
Wait.
And it's the same one that I have, hopefully, because mine has my notes on it, so I'm gonna use mine. So if it turns out that I don't follow along with you guys, let me know. I'm gonna use, the numbers should all be the same, but. So, it starts with town vehicles. And so the 2025, I'm mostly gonna be focusing on 2025, maybe a little bit on 2026. But like the police department has they have a replacement cycle for all their police cruisers. I'm sure they'll talk about that more when they come to present to us. That's reflected kind of across the years. The fire department, I know that when they come to present to us, they're gonna give us their matrix for their fire vehicles. And engines, I know that there is a large, I'm gonna use this handy ruler that I got so that I don't mess up across things. They are looking at getting a tanker in 2026, and they have a capital reserve fund that they draw from that. And every year they come and they ask us for a little bit of money for that. I know that they are also looking at an ambulance for this year as well. Flipping to the next page.
Elizabeth.
Go ahead.
I just had a quick question, Sam.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't mean to make you go
No,
through
this
this
is
line by
fine.
line. I guess, last year at the deliberative session, there were a lot of questions raised about the capital reserve fund for apparatus, fire apparatus, and it did not pass, did it?
It
It did not.
It did not pass. Okay, yeah, you said yes, and I was like, wait, yes, it passed, or no?
It did not
It did
pass.
not pass, which is very unusual. This is usually funded every single year. One of the concerns, there were concerns about the way the fund was being used, but there was another concern raised about, are we even saving enough money? Because the amount, which had been $250 for a long time, had not been raised. And now this is a substantial increase. So I guess my question is, did CIP dig into it to evaluate that the proper amount was being put into the capital reserve fund?
So the fire department does a really good job of making sure that there is enough in there. The reason that they are going to be requesting more this year is because it failed last year. So that's why they need to request a higher number. Fire trucks are very expensive. I mean, as we can see, the one in 2026 is $1.1 million. The current, I'm not gonna quote the current balance of the fire department capital reserve fund because I don't know what it is, but I know that it is, they are very good at making sure that they have that planned out. They have their own fire vehicle matrix that they plan out to like 2035 or 2030, like crazy far out. Yeah, probably more like 2035, that they know how old vehicles are. If a truck is 20 years old, they know that it needs to be replaced. Nobody wants to pay for a $1.1 million fire truck all in one tax year, and it's also like a very necessary thing. But the CIP didn't dig into, are they asking for enough money? They asked for more, and I would say that they did that on themselves.
So this is a long-term adjustment. I mean, it's not just to make up for last year because it stays at 350 from here on.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, I mean, we can ask the chief that when he comes and see his matrix and walk through it. I just didn't know if CIP had dug into that at all.
No, and we definitely addressed the fact that it was voted down last year, and now there's going to be a warrant article for a higher number, and how that might be a little bit unusual, but I guess I trust that he knows how much money he's going to need to buy future fire trucks and kind of what the trend of that is.
Okay.
Do you think that by increasing the number, it may risk
You have to fail again?
it failing again? I guess and also,
Yeah, that was a concern that they had, but if they have less money in it, then they would have to push out the vehicle, and then it may risk just failing again and again.
okay.
And then when the fire truck fails,
Okay, and real quick, Kelly, has the select board had any discussion on this dollar amount? And have they supported, are they in favor of this 350, or is there a different number that?
We know that the request for this year was going up to make up for it not being funded last year, but we're really going off of anticipated costs because they have increased so much in the past few years. So it's not to say that this won't change in the future, but just as we're seeing rising costs of things, it seems to align with the fact that we're underfunding this fund.
So are you saying the select board, the 350 this year, but you might lower it in years coming?
I mean, of course, anything on this matrix
Right.
can be adjusted year over year, but, yeah, I mean, the purpose of this is so that by the time it comes to purchase, we don't need to burden the taxpayers with a $1.1 million purchase, so, I don't know what the future is. It's also been like 2 years to get builds out. There's talks of processes where you can put your name on a list without a financial obligation to keep you on the list, because you now have to bid to even get a truck. So there's lots of moving parts in the apparatus world. But as far as cost, it's been fluctuating since COVID, really all over the place, so it could
Okay.
change.
Derek?
Last year was one of the first years that the select board proposed this to come from new property taxation. In the past, it had been funded from unassigned fund balance. It's going to be staff recommendation this year to fund this from unassigned fund balance, so it'd be no new property taxes. They've come from the existing fund balance.
Well, and we're also gonna have a discussion about that today as a committee too.
There's also been a long-standing sort of gentleman's agreement, if you will, about that if we fund this capital reserve fund year after year after year, they do not come back to us and say, okay, we need a new fire truck, but we're kind of short, so we're going to put some money in the operating budget. They tried that once, and it did not end well. So there's this sort of agreement that money, we're not going to buy a new fire truck until there's enough money in that account to pay for it, because we've saved, it's our savings account.
Right.
So I would assume, I mean, chiefs change, personnel change, but I would assume that is still in effect.
Peter, do you have something?
I was going to ask, was there a reason, was that discussed here in terms of whether it go through from unassigned fund balance or new taxes?
That's,
last year?
I mean, that's up to the governing bodies to determine what they fund from unassigned
I can
fund
answer
balance.
that
Go ahead, Kelly.
question. We had to make adjustments to keep our unassigned fund balance at its appropriate levels. So we weren't able to fund much of anything with unassigned, I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. To bring it up to the recommended percentage by DRA, so we were unable to fund things through unassigned fund balance last year, which is why they were marked for taxation. So that's nothing that the budget committee, I mean, they could provide input to either governing body if they like, but that just kind of depends on how much we have and what its uses have been over the years is
Got
up
it.
to
Yeah,
that board.
so you're saying it was not with any other input, it was for that
Correct.
reason?
Yep.
The DRA made changes on the recommended range that the unassigned fund balance needs to be. I think it's now 12%. And that's what the select board's goal was, to bring it up to 12%, so they had none of that extra.
Our goal is
like-
16%, but to keep it at the minimum of 12, we did not fund with unassigned fund balances we have in years past, or were able to provide tax relief.
Thank you.
Does
Okay,
anyone
go ahead,
else have
Sam.
any other questions about police vehicles or fire vehicles? Something that I forgot to mention, which maybe doesn't take effect so much when we're talking about vehicles, is because this is a planning tool, you will see things in the very far out years that are maybe very expensive, and you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like, we're not gonna do that. It's a planning tool, so it goes on here to start the conversation. So that's just something to think about. Moving on to DPW vehicles, Adam is fantastic about making sure that once again, that there is a very good rotation of vehicles. He's also very good at getting grant funding, and we'll notice that a little bit later on, I think, too. But so, big things in here for 2025 would be I feel like I'm gonna get them wrong. I wanna say that the Vermac is it's not a recycling truck. No, it's the, it's a recycling truck, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Do you mind
and
just
that
saying
was
the
def-
line number for me? It's just easier for
Sorry.
me to go. No, it's fine.
50? 49?
I'm sorry, yeah, so it's
50.
G1, yeah, so 49, and that's a Peterbilt, and that is I believe it's a recycling truck. It could be a trash pickup truck. Don't swear me to that, okay? And then, but at the very top, you'll notice that there's a little $1 in there, and you're probably all like, what's that? So there is right now there is a box truck and a trailer, or a truck and a trailer that go together to create one truck. And so they're gonna combine that into just buying one vehicle instead. Yeah, into a single roll-off truck, there are these canisters that we put the trash in, the trash gets hauled to the landfills. Okay. And then they have a plow in here as well, that's line 52. And that's pretty much for 2024 for DPW vehicles. Sewer has a new truck as well. They're all the way down at the bottom, line 92. That vehicle has 103,000 miles on it. It's a 2015. The sewer fund is a enterprise fund, so it's very much self-sustaining. So that's it about vehicles. Did anyone have any questions about that?
Not about that, but I'm just looking at the spreadsheet more carefully. Why are there 4 columns for 2025, unless my glasses are really
No,
going?
there are.
Why are there 4 columns? Because it's only one purchase, right?
So, if you look on the first page, you can see the headers appear correctly. It looks like it didn't carry over when it printed. It looks like it maybe wrapped the text. So throughout the CIP process, the CIP committee has a proposed number that they're looking at from the departments. They have a number that they end at if they make any changes on that 2025 year. And then column J is after the planning board reviews this full matrix and the report from the committee. And then they take a vote on what they think the final matrix number should be. The detail that you see in columns K through P gives you each year, beginning with 25, out through the 6 years of the matrix.
Okay.
So when the budget process happens with the governing bodies, they're looking at column J, which is 2025 Planning Board adopted final matrix. In this particular matrix, there wasn't a lot of movement in what was suggested for 2025 as a year, so that's why you see it repeating across.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
Does anyone have any other questions about vehicles at all? So, moving on to projects, which are fun. I'm gonna use both my matrices. So I know when we toured the police department, it talked about the parking lot expansion. So that is for the 2025 matrix, and then in 2026, so that's line, okay, the line numbers are the same, this is good, 105. And then there's a locker room expansion in 106, and then I guess just to touch upon 107, they have a new records management that, I point that out because it's just a very large number. And that's probably what we want to like think about for like the next couple of years. That records management, there was some discussion about moving that into sooner years because the records management that our police department uses is quite old. But ultimately, it was to lessen the tax impact. We kept that in 2025. Does anyone have any
Go ahead,
questions?
Brian.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, Samantha, and I'm not sure this is, you can answer this, or maybe the department heads. But I noticed like on row, oh gosh, what row is it? 105, I see the department priority is 3 versus the other ones are 2, but yet they're asking for funding before the other ones. So can you comment to that? Like why would?
So the priority listing is, I guess, I would say like the necessity for the place to function. I mean, like, could the police department function without a parking lot expansion? Yes, but I think that there is we talked about the ice and the fact that it is a hazard. And that, having injured officers is obviously a hazard and the liability that comes along with that. So I think maybe this question might be better suited for the police chief, but we didn't change any of the numbers around at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it would be like priority number 1 if that's the case for liability versus 3.
Yeah, I believe priority number 1 is set for something that is an absolute necessity. Like there are very few ones on this, which I think is very much a testament to the department heads of like what is a true necessity emergency item and what is more like, I guess that, I hate saying this, but like a want versus a need kind of thing. It doesn't mean that a 3 isn't necessarily a need, but it is not like, it's not dire, I guess would be the.
So let me ask, was there discussion on, I see we have a parking lot expansion in 2025, but then we have a new police department building
Correct.
in 2029. So we're spending $150,000 to then, for 3 years of a parking lot.
So I know that I meant to say it in the beginning when I know I said it in the middle. This is a planning tool, so we have to put it on the matrix in order for us to start having the conversation about it. Things can always get pushed back and moved around. But I think that the question of should this be rectified, what you're saying is like, oh, we're going to get a new parking lot and we're going to have a new locker room for 3 years and then we're going to change it.
And we don't even know if the building's going to be there or not. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and so I see that.
So can I just add
Go ahead.
a comment to quell any more of this discussion, although I think the thought process is correct, that the $150,000 for the parking lot was already removed from the budget for this year through
okay.
select board and department. I was gonna go over that during my update of what we've removed so far, but that is one of them.
Okay.
So-
Wasn't that
Great.
originally in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
So it's already got bumped out a year, and now it's getting bumped out another year?
I guess I would also ask, if there's anything else that I touch upon that has been removed, feel free to interrupt me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think the thought process is exactly why the CIP matrix exists, so I don't have a problem with us talking about it, but just for like actuality's sake, that's off
Okay.
the table for now.
Okay.
As presented in this, at least.
Olivia, and then I think Laura had something.
I think Chief Sereno had touched on this in the tour, that we would be seeing it as a projected project in the event that we're not able to secure a building also, because it's been such a struggle finding a location, finding available space. and to be able to move forward and start thinking about those projects rather than waiting until it is a dire level 1 need.
Okay.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, and not to speak for him, but he was sort of clear about, there's a point where, yeah, we want to add stuff to the matrix because we have this current station that we need to, deal with and keep up and have. But at what point does it mean, like, we can't keep doing this? We do actually need new buildings, so I think it's the both of those kind of being planned out together on this, knowing that things will change, one will or won't happen, and as time goes on, that's to be seen.
Has the select board talked about moving up the feasibility study, or is the plan still next year?
Nope, that's at, no, do you know anything that Eric's planning on doing, but go ahead.
So the police chief and I have been working on an RFP for the needs analysis, and we'll be bringing that to the select board probably on the 18th of November to put an RFP out to have a firm assist us with doing a real good look at what the needs of the police station are currently, but also into the future. So that whether it's a renovation or a new building, we'll be able to do the appropriate building size.
Okay. I think a report or something to us would be good when you figure that out, just so we can kind of get an idea of what the options are.
Does anyone have any more questions about police projects? Moving on to fire projects. So, Mass Fire Road renovation, that is the Penardville Fire.
Oh, go
looks
ahead,
like
no,
should
you can talk
continue.
about it,
Okay.
and I'll give you the change.
Okay, so it was originally like $1.6 million, and then they changed it to 120 because there is, as when we toured the fire station, there were a lot of things that need to be updated to just make it, just make it a better fire station that, attracts employees to it, but also allows, our fire department to be there, because, we do have 24/7 fire, which is awesome. So if they're there, we want them to be there for a reason. But now Kelly's gonna jump in and change it, so.
Yeah, that was also reduced by $120,000. I mean, I'm sorry, $100,000.
Okay,
So
it's 20.
$20,000, what is
Is all
that?
that's left?
Yep.
What is the
So
renovation?
it's going into a couple things like flooring, but then the big thing is, it's not an HVAC study, but it's for HVAC, for their, what's it called? It's an environmental,
It's really analysis of kind of the building envelope. Right now, they're running a lot of like window AC units out of it, which
Right.
are, so they want to have somebody provide them a plan to upgrade the HVAC.
Okay.
So what was the amount? Went down-
efficiency, environmental efficiency study. Thank
We
you.
went down to 20,000 or 100,000? Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so not going out into the future, is looking at public works projects. Right, and nobody had any other questions about the fire department? So we got the road plan in here. That's pretty much the same year over year. It goes up slightly, obviously, because we want to maintain adequate road funding. I know that when Adam comes here, he will talk about the different, like where the roads proposal is. They work really well with the sewer department too, to make sure they don't, redo a road and then the sewer department comes in and they tear it up and have to redo it. There is a critical culvert replacement rehab program. We are looking at different, there was one culvert that was originally a bridge, and it had this 80-20 grant funding, but it was still gonna be this incredible replacement, so they reduced that. That was something from last year that changed from this year. You'll ask me what street it is, and
I see Montalona, Juniper, Page, Center.
yeah, I wanna say it's Center, and I don't wanna be,
Go
do you
ahead,
know? Okay.
Yeah, so this is a project that they have been awarded the 80% grant. This is going to be for a culvert replacement on Montalona. They're doing planning right now on Juniper and will circle back to Center Street.
That's very
And that we reduced by 200,000?
That one you didn't touch because that one is 80% funded by a Homeland Security grant that the Select Board has already voted to accept and expend
The 200,000 we're moving to special article?
for the road plan, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so the 423,000, that's the 20%, that's our burden.
That's the total appropriation, we have to gross appropriate, that's the total project cost. So if you look down.
So we're gonna get we're gonna get money back.
Yep,
Yeah, so-
on line 130, there you see
I see it,
the hazard mitigation grant, the actual state portion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions about Public Works projects?
So the road plan was reduced, the 1.8 million?
We're just moving a portion. On this line, yes, we're moving 200,000 to special article.
Okay, so you're just funding it differently. And
Why did they decide to do it? Because typically it's been in the budget.
Yeah, this amount will be, what is it, 1,600?
1 million.
I'm sorry,
1.6.
my brain is really just.
Wouldn't it be nice if it were 1,600?
Yes.
1.6 million.
Yeah.
Okay, so the ask is gonna be 1.6 again, and then 200,000 in a special article?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Sam.
So, moving on to the library. The window restoration, that number was originally $90,000. They moved it to 40. Our library is over 100 years old. And so there are only certain architects and certain builders who can work on it because it is a historic landmark. And so that is the fixing of those windows in 2026. There is, and I keep on forgetting line numbers, I'm sorry, friends. 137 is the line number. And then the exterior restoration, which includes repointing of masonry and chimneys for 2026, is $80,000. Go ahead.
Good, Frank.
Sam, the number on the windows went down from 90,000 to 40,000. Does that mean they're gonna do half the windows, or does that
No,
mean?
they changed what they were going to do.
So the scope of the repairs was reduced?
Correct, because originally it involved two different, do I have the old one? Actually, I have the-
Is that every window, or are there just some that, a portion of them that need some work?
I believe it's every window. And I mean, it also helps offset the, like, heating and energy costs as well.
Right.
But I know that original 50,000, that extra 50,000 was for another project. It was windows and,
Was it the shelving we had to move?
I think it might have been shelving. Yeah.
I think when Diane comes to present, we'll be able to ask her
Yeah.
these
Yeah,
questions.
yeah,
Yeah.
but so I would say that 40,000 is for the windows.
I've seen a lot of figures from them on that. All right.
Moving, any other questions about the library? Moving on to town hall projects. There is on line 147 I'm sorry, that's 2026. They have their refresh virtualization, the Microsoft server licensing, that's $300,000. That is one of those priority one things. I want you to correct me if I'm wrong on this, Danielle, Eric, but that is basically like our entire IT department and all of the servers.
It is, and we've actually, when the board had to reallocate funds for the default budget back in March, they retained $150,000 for that project. That project is currently out to bid, and our hopes is to do it out of 2024 budgeted funds. I think Samantha was great because she gave up a lot of her summer nights to do it, but because that was done before the budget process, there have been quite a few changes from the CIP planning tool to the budget that you're gonna see in your binders. So that 300,000 is not in the budget, because we're trying to do that this year.
Okay.
So I have a question about that. Do we pay the same licensing fees as like a business?
We're much more similar to a business than the schools are. The state, a lot of the local governments in state of New Hampshire are trying to work with companies like Microsoft to get the kind of the sweet deals that the school gets on software and hardware. But we're much more similar to a business than a school.
So some of them have nonprofit rates too. We probably don't even get that, do we?
We do not. They have government suites, but the cost is closer to the private industry than it is their nonprofit or their school
Okay.
rates.
Okay.
The other big one for 2026 on line 151 is the Grassmere Town Hall ADA elevator addition. I know that every year they look for LCHIP funding for that. I don't want to speak for you guys, but I feel very comfortable saying that like if they were not awarded the LCHIP fund, then that project would probably be pushed out as well. Even though it definitely, not having an elevator definitely hinders the use of that building for town functions.
So how much, the existing capital reserve fund is gonna cover that portion, and then LCHIP's gonna cover the rest, if it's approved, right?
We anticipate that there would be a gap between grant funding and what we have in the capital reserve fund, that the Historic District Commission would have to do a capital donation plan to do that. When they did the 3 years of deposits into the capital reserve fund, they really wanted to say to the taxpayers that those 3 deposits would be the last taxpayers, or the property tax that would go into that, and they still want to hold true to that.
Okay.
And then, I'm gonna touch upon this one, even though it's a little bit far out. In line 152, there's a master plan update, that is something that the CIP committee actually recommended. We haven't had a master plan in 10-ish years.
By the time 2028
Yeah, by the
comes
time
around,
2028 was around, we haven't had one in 10 years. It's really important. And does anyone have any other questions about town hall projects? All right. Moving on to Parks and Rec. I'm on starting at line 161. For 2025, the only really big thing, and we saw this when we went on the tour as well, was the Barnard tennis pickleball courts, how they're cracking, changing. Oh, my line number's different?
You're off by like 1.
I'm sorry. I wanted to use mine because I had notes, but.
I think it's literally just one offside.
Yeah, I just
Zero.
wanted,
I
in
just
case
dropped down.
anyone
It's
was,
not fun.
I just wanted to.
You're
Well, yeah,
close.
Well, no, because I feel like mine was off by more than that, more than.
Well, and I'm like,
There might have been
Pickleball
another
was
one.
Okay,
164 for me.
164 pickleball. And so we talked about that when we went onto the tour as well. They also had, and that's pretty much the only thing that's coming up, like, in 2025 and 2026. Parks and Rec also talked to, I guess, 2027, talked about doing a Roy Park rehab as well. And then they had conversations about pools and sports complexes and whatnot, but those are much further out and much lower, or like, I guess, like, more of a lower priority. Does anyone have any questions about Parks and Rec?
So it looks like there's some revenue for that tennis courts mentioned in the notes, the memo section, but then I don't see it on the,
I see
The
impact
impact
fees.
fees at the bottom?
Impact fees,
oh,
7,000.
P&R, impact fees, 7, okay. But then it also says, and rev fund,
Yeah.
The money they
revolving
get
fund, I
from
don't
the
see anything
camp
for
and stuff.
revolving
The
fund.
Parks and Recs Commission has pledged $150,000 towards that project. So that is actually in our CIP budget. There's an offsetting revenue on the
Okay.
revenue side.
So what's gonna be the total, so the ask is gonna be 470, but how much are we,
It'd be
What's the net?
$320,000 from taxation.
okay, 300,
We have to appropriate the full project, and then we have the revenue coming in from it.
Now, was the school gonna contribute? Because I think Rick said they were gonna contribute about 10%.
Rick has started that discussion with the school. I don't know if they've come to an agreement on that.
And Kelly, the select board is moving forward with this project.
It's in the presentation, yeah. We haven't made any changes for large projects.
Okay.
Do we have a school tennis team?
We do.
Yeah.
I did not.
Good.
I remember at the tour, there was discussion of, I think Rick was talking about, was it you that had asked? I can't remember, someone, I believe it was Joe, asking about like doing different bids, like for different types of projects, right, that we wanted to hear about. Was there discussion about that at CAP since then? Have you guys?
I don't think they've met.
No, so we, CIP ended on September 12th was our last meeting.
Okay.
So we didn't have that discussion because we don't really talk so much about the number, what this number is.
Yeah.
More of just, okay, this is the number you say it is, let's move it around so that it's not really in that tax impact phase.
And we can ask Rick when he presents too, if he's
Yeah.
looked into that further, like we requested, or I requested.
I don't want to give you credit for something.
No, I did. Okay, thank you, Sam. Keep going.
So flipping, we've got sewer commission. The sewer commission is an enterprise fund. They are self-sustaining. So they have, once again, I know I mentioned this when I talked about the road plan. They work really well with DPW to make sure that they don't, DPW doesn't rehab a road and then the sewer commission comes and tears it all up. It's definitely, so they have their kind of sewer line road, I want to call it a road plan, but they're, at the same time, they're kind of redoing the roads when they tear up the sewer lines, so. Does anyone have any questions on that? Fantastic. So, just to, there are, I know that, I was like glancing at Elizabeth's email. She had asked about estimated lease and bond payments. There's no lease and bond payments for any of this until 2028, which I believe was the year that like the pool exists in. Right, is it the pool? Yeah.
Sam, are you talking about Parks and Rec, or are you talking about the whole?
I'm talking about for the town, for all town
Okay.
projects. There's no bond payments on any of this.
Okay.
And then, I think the thing that I'm looking for is at the very end. Okay, moving on. School capital, or school, capital improvements projects. The school year obviously functions a little bit differently than the town does. I don't know if, Jared.
You're doing great.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you wanted to touch on anything. Because there's not, I ended up watching this one. I missed this particular meeting for the school, so I watched it on YouTube afterwards for Thank You GTV. So I didn't get to ask a whole bunch of questions. But they have a schedule for the laptop cart replacements for Bartlett, and then they have a lot of things that are bonded in the 2028-2029 school year. I would
Yeah,
say
you
for,
guys like playing a bank heist or something? I mean, just everything is in that year. 2028.
so
Do
I,
you want to touch on that at all?
No.
I was trying to figure out who you were asking the question to.
Yeah, is this like a new school, or is this just all the projects all at the same time?
I think they are looking to bond a lot of them together through multiple schools, just to make sure that it, because you get, if you have just one contractor who's doing something, but across multiple schools at the same time. But I believe it is just pushed out in order to, to move it around later. And also, a lot of the funding for these projects comes from the school's CRF fund as well.
Well, I think it could probably fund like two of
Some,
those.
some of them,
There's a
but
lot
I,
here.
well, I know
Yeah,
that
that's
they
why
have,
I'm like, there's
they
a
have a
lot.
lot of projects in that CRF fund, but they, obviously that CRF fund does not have the funding to complete all of those projects that are in there. So for, I know that they've also, moving a little bit further down to line 232, they are talking about Promethean board replacements and possibly having those on a replacement cycle throughout. Does anyone have any questions about that first page of the school?
I have a general.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Laura.
So I'm still unclear about why everything's listed in 28, 29. Is that just so it's on here, but because it's kind of still floating around?
Go ahead, Derek.
Just, if you look on page 9 of 10, on line 324, there's a very good note there. So there's a $90 million bond, again, this is a few years out, which would reflect $20 million in repairs to existing buildings and new middle school. So I think that's why you're seeing all of those repair items in blue in that year. They would bond all those together, and then also consider a new middle school. Again, this is a planning tool, so this is a few years into the future, but that's why you're seeing all those.
All right. So I think that, can you just cover the 2025 ones? Because I think I'm seeing that maybe that figure is going to move back and forth on years. And
Right, so,
Sam, if I can help you on this one
I
for
would love you.
2025.
Yeah, I'd love that you could do that.
As we know from years past, there's a multitude of projects, as Sam had alluded to, but we use our CRF to fund all of those projects. So it's a prioritization. We always have to move things around. The big thing for 2025 that we are focusing on is the cistern for the middle school. So for those of you that don't know, there's a cistern that we use for fire suppression. And we did a phase 1 of that to repair the repair the cistern, which is a holding tank at the bottom of the hill. There's a phase 2 associated with that, and we're projecting somewhere of upwards of $300,000 for a phase 2. And that is I'm going to use the term, very critical for fire suppression and safety at our school, because that allows us to use the sprinkler system, God forbid if anything ever happened. So that is what we're focusing on for 2025, as well as other smaller projects. But the cistern is the big one for 2025.
And in case you guys don't, that's line 243.
So what was, did you say 300,000? It's on the CFP for 700.
Yeah. At the bottom of it, 700,000 for the year, or 700,000 for the cistern?
the project.
Okay. Well, it's a planning tool.
Okay, but that year's upon us.
That's what we'll be discussing as part of our overall budgetary stuff.
So does the school board plan on moving forward with $700,000 request in a warrant article?
We'll find out when we get it. We have not decided on any warrant articles for the CRF. This is a planning tool, so it's unfortunate. I think Samantha's doing a great job, and I want to commend her for it. But to ask for specific projects, I think is inappropriate of Sam, because she doesn't have the detail around it. We need the department heads and everybody else for it.
Okay. So we'll table this, I guess, until we get more information on the project.
Yeah, I know that there was also talk about a generator in the high school, because the high school is is the emergency? No.
It is the town emergency center.
It is the town emergency shelter.
Here.
And so that was line 266.
Yeah. We're trying to
Right.
get anytime that they have a grant that they'll be 75% covered,
Mm-hmm.
we're probably going to try to move on that. Normally, there's grants that are 50/50 matches. We can get those every year. So we want to try to get a good deal for a grant in order to move forward on something like that, though. But that's why it's on the planning tool, because we want to make sure it's on the planning tool so that we can do it.
And that grant is 75%?
There is no grant at 75%.
Okay.
The
So the
hope.
grant on line 266 would be 50?
Well, the hope would be that you would get a grant that is 75% to cover it.
Okay.
But
We most likely will not be moving forward with that project unless if we get a 75% coverage of a grant, which we do not have.
Okay.
In moving on to that next page, there are a lot of things in the high school continuing. We've got the furniture in here, we've got the doors for the theater. I know we talked about a lot of that when we went to, when we did the tour of the high school. Laptop parks, computer rehabs, and then district-wide, moving on to they did that one. It's a lot of things that are very important, but are also like seal coat line stripping, custodial cleaning equipment, secondary switches, server replacement. Anybody have any question about any of that? There's no like big, giant, crazy project. The page that I wanted. So on. Yeah, so looking at that page 10 of 10, that line 334 is the subtotal of town projects, town vehicles, and school projects, with the total cost of projects that are leased and bonded. And you can see, like, with the exception of 2030, which, keep in mind that year is very far out, that tax impact is, I don't want to say it's not this huge, crazy spike, right? It's fairly level. And that, I think, that number is kind of what matters most to people. And also that line 330 is that with the revenues factored in. Projects with revenues. So that's kind of the whole number that we have, that, that comes from taxes. But obviously that's a loose number because, as we talked about, Kelly's already laying stuff out, so. But yeah, does anyone have any questions on the matrix as a whole?
Thank you for taking the summer to do
Yeah.
that.
This was so much fun. I would do it again, like I think it's always such a joy, and like, I get to meet with all the department heads, and then I kind of also get like a little sneak peek at the budget before you guys, and then when we go on tours, I get to look at the stuff, and,
I'm glad you liked it.
I do.
Good.
I do it again.
All right, is there anything else for CIP? I lost my agenda, one sec.
I guess my point,
Go ahead,
and
Elizabeth.
we should probably mention that handout, that email that I handed around in case, because I think we forgot to mention it to
Go
them.
ahead.
That was an email that I was trying to send to the committee, but do it under the right to know law, and Danielle pointed out to me I can't really do that, so instead she printed it for me, and that's why I handed it out. Almost everything that was in that email, Joe already addressed and incorporated it in the meeting. But it's just an effort to be transparent about the communication that was going on that we couldn't have in a meeting because we didn't have a meeting. But I guess my thing with CIP is it usually, this is where we go when our operating expenses get too high. We take things out of CIP. And I worry that now, we haven't done any really big projects in this town for 25 years. The kindergarten was paid for almost entirely with state building aid. The fire station on Church Street he got a big grant, and it wasn't that expensive, all things considered. And I worry that we are not planning and investing properly for these big things. And now it looks like we have a police station and a middle school coming in at almost the same year. So that's why I asked for the report. I wanted to see what else was out there on the horizon. I mean, I'd heard things, but I didn't know for sure. And I look at our debt, this last page, I mean, we have very low, where does our debt stand in relative, like, as far as other towns go? Do we carry more debt than other towns? Do we carry less debt? Are we at the average?
Do you want me to speak to that? We're very low compared to a lot of other communities. A lot of communities are utilizing debt as a way to kind of cash flow things, but also lessen that impact in a single year. Goffstown has tended to stay away from debt, historically speaking. So you can see on here, there's very few things that are bonded. When they're bonded, they tend to be, the biggest one we see is 1.6 million still out there that had to do with the fire station. That's very low. A lot of other communities you see on a regular basis, $40 million bonds and up, depending on what their projects are or whether they're trying to combine projects. So obviously, each community gets to decide what's best for them. Other communities may choose to utilize more CRFs. We're very low on that side of things as well. So it's just kind of preference of the community.
So, I mean, my concern is that we are not going to be able to get away forever without building a new building. At some point, we're going to have to do it.
Yeah.
We need to be saving, we need to be planning, we need to be prioritizing, so we are not hit with it all at one time.
Well, I agree, but that's not really our purview. I guess the governing bodies have to come out and say, this is our goal in the next 2 years, is to start a bond for a police station.
I
And
agree,
I
but
think
we
there's
can
a
also
process.
raise the conversation, and I mean, that's part of our function too, is to have these conversations with the governing bodies, because at the end of the day, we're gonna have to recommend or not recommend these suggestions that they're making.
Laura?
Yeah, so that kind of goes along with a thought/question I had, which is, so last year, for example, the fire trucks, the money that they wanted to put towards it, that got voted down. If that keeps getting voted down, then what position does it put the town in when that is a need? Like, when it comes time that, like, I think we need to be talking about that out loud, because I don't know if the community knows, like, what's at stake later on if we don't put away money. And I think, even though it's the governing body's purview of, I lost my train of after that. I lost my train of thought about it when Joe answered the question. It maybe will come back to me.
But
I don't know, I'm
to
just
your
concerned.
to your point earlier, you talked about the police station. Why are we putting money into this police station, and then we've got a thing on the CIP to build a new police station? Perfectly valid question. Well, because we haven't really committed to either path yet.
Commit to
And in the
something,
end,
yeah.
that's gonna end up costing us more money, because we don't wanna put money into something we're gonna get rid of. So it seems to me, I mean, I get that CIP is a planning tool, and it didn't always used to be that way. CIP used to have some teeth to it. 20 years ago, if you talk to like an old timer like Phil Devanza, he'll tell you, oh, things don't get past CIP. But I'm not advocating for that, because CIP is not an elected governing body. But at some point, we need to commit to things and plan in not a, like, let's just throw things at the wall and see what happens. But we are going to do this, and we're gonna start saving, and we're gonna make sacrifices in other areas so we can do this, and we're gonna move forward with it. But right now, we're not doing that as a community. It seems like everything's just kind of flying up, oh, let's try this, will we fund this, let's do this. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, my thought is, I mean, generally speaking, I think it'd be a good opportunity to do like a, I'm not sure which department or governing body would do it, but to cast a vision and get community engagement and involvement about these bigger projects that are coming. And I'm not sure when we can hold that venue, but I think we need to do that and solicit that feedback, because you're right. A lot of people like, you know what? I'm not going to spend all this money for something that's going to happen next year. But if you cast a vision down the road, chances are they're going to get behind it, right? Or maybe not, but at least they have to know that ahead of time to actually start thinking about and wrestling with it and think about, okay, how is it going to impact me personally? How is it going to benefit the community? But they have to start talking about it now for the future, to
Yeah.
cast that vision.
And I really I honestly, the $80 million is gonna fix everything that we need to fix. Like, I'm okay, like, I'm not necessarily okay with it, but like at least saying, like, we have $80 million worth of stuff, we're gonna bond it over this many years, it's gonna cost this much money, and everything's fixed. right? I kind of like the idea of something where like the school district is coming in and saying like, these are all the projects and, you know, we're gonna get it done all at once. Jared, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, and Elizabeth, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. That's why we have the town plan. That's why it's going to be developed. And unfortunately, a comprehensive town plan hasn't been done, I don't think, since 2006. Because the last one didn't
2019 was
have
the
the school.
last. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. 2019 was the last master plan.
Did it include the school and the vision that was associated with it? No,
I
it
don't
didn't,
know.
because the last one was done was 2006. So hopefully the next one does have that. Because there hasn't been a town vision or town plan that actually includes things like Glen Lake and what it does. So if we're, you know, I agree, it should be done. I think it needs to be done. Hopefully, we have a comprehensive one done.
Yeah, but a lot of community members don't know, and maybe some don't care, but I think they have to be involved sooner than later so they can plan and help, basically help plan with us collectively and be engaged. Because otherwise, if last year was a indicator of anything's coming, if there's other bigger tax appropriations, it's going to be shot down. That's kind of the tone I'm getting. So how do we cast that vision so it's healthy for everyone, it's fair for everyone, and it's benefiting our community? So,
I think Frank, do you have something, and then Laura?
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a lot of good points brought up. I agree with Elizabeth and how it's important to commit, but on the other hand, too, our budget, construction costs, interest rates, and all the variables, it's a little bit like herding cats. We're projecting into the future, and nobody has a crystal ball. So on one hand, I love to plan for it. I love to know how much we're going to need and when and where and why. However, I mean, just a year and a half ago, interest rates went up 2.25% in a couple of months. That changed everybody's bond rate. So it's kind of like herding cats, nailing Jell-O to the wall. But I do like what Brian says about getting the community involved in regard to what Jared said about we need a plan. You know, when I speak to my clients, the first thing I ask them is, where are you now? Where do you want to go? And anything you do that is not on that path is wasteful. Like putting money into a police station that we're going to end up not using. So I would recommend the first step is finding out exactly where we want to go. I think that's what we should commit to.
So are you, can I ask, are you talking about something outside of the master plan? Like, what do you mean when you say community engagement?
Oh, us speaking to our neighbors and the people that, you know, how important would you rather have a middle school or a police department? What are your thoughts? What is more critical? You know, if the police station's roof falls in, well, then that just got a little more critical.
But I mean, that, by putting it on the ballot is the mechanism for doing that, right? And that's our job to do that all the time, right? So.
Right. The challenge, though, is like the library. If they don't like the color of the or if there's a plan for a building and somebody doesn't like, let's say, the color of it, you know, it's orange. I don't like orange or purple. Okay, well, now it's voted down, it's out, and we're back to square one, and we don't have the building that we were kind of counting on in our plan. So all I'm saying is, we need some sort of at least a rough destination to start, you know? And without that, we are going to waffle around and flail around because we don't have a target, you know?
Okay, Laura, go ahead.
Thank you. So I think a couple things about this. I think the target is the plan, not the amount. Like, we can't project an amount that's super specific for 2030. But we can say, okay, we are, as a community, coming together and saying, we are going to put minimal, just as an example, minimal amounts of money into the current police station, because as a community, we are going to plan to have a new one in 2032, whatever the case is. That is the plan, because no, you can't plan for the money to an extent, but you can set the goal and then people have it in mind. And Brian's totally right where the community needs to know what's coming, what we're thinking, all this stuff. And as part of budget committee, and this is what I've been saying since like day one, it's our job to get out there and talk about, like, this is our budget. I don't think we've looked at it like this, at least while I've been here. But like, this is a budget committee budget. It's our job to go out there and like promote it, ask questions. That's part of this process. So really that's kind of on us because the mechanism we have is voting, is town meeting, or all those things when people get to speak and voice their concerns and we can hopefully answer questions. But who's gonna get the correct information out there if not us who are doing the work?
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think go back to your comment, Kelly, about the master plan. I think that's great, but if you ask an average citizen, they don't really know what the master plan is, where it is, what it's about. So I think it's great to get a refresh one, get a new vision. But my thing is, how do we create a venue where we have the master plan and whoever the governing body is that's going to talk to it is casting that vision, casting that story to solicit involvement from the community in that process, right? I think that's a piece that we miss because I know we have a master plan, I've reviewed it, but it's really, I don't have all the context behind it. And I'll give you an example, and this is not going to be a discredit to or a negative to the library, but a prime example would be, and we went through it, the library asked for $7.2 million for library expansion. I think they missed an opportunity where what they're asking for is a community center, in my opinion. So they didn't cast a vision, they didn't cast a story. So when they asked for library expansion of $7.2 million, it failed significantly because they didn't communicate very well, right? It was, in my opinion, it was a very short-sighted ask without really communicating the value that it's going to bring for a larger expansion. But again, it was more of a community center. Yes, as a library, but more of a community center. So that's an example.
Thank you. Go ahead, Samantha, then Olivia.
So I guess my first thought would be is that the community conversation that we're talking about, the function of that is the town meeting. And maybe, like, that is where people come and ask questions, and that is where people talk about it, and even the deliberative session before then. But I guess, even just to speak to what Brian just said, the library had many meetings beforehand to talk about the plan. They had their poster board. They showed that poster board all the time. They had it out in front of the library constantly. People didn't go to that meeting to hear more about it. And my concern would be is that if it is nice to say that, like, we should have another community style meeting where maybe we can review this with everyone, but there are so many ways for people to access this on their own time. Like, they can watch our meetings on GTV. All of our minutes are public. Public comment, people can come here and watch us and just attend and listen to everything we do. I am a person who's completely available for anyone who wants to talk to me at any time. And I would think that most of you are too. If people don't want to, they're not going to. And at some point there is like a little bit of personal responsibility to ask someone a question and not take like a first look and shoot it down and not try to have any kind of conversation, you know?
Olivia.
Samantha pretty much said everything I was just going to say, but I think there's also a very real barrier for the public to understand the way things work, with what the actual terminology in preparing a budget and at things like public meeting and at deliberatives, where oftentimes public that do come and attend don't even actually realize where they are in that process and that they're at the place where they get to ask those questions. So I think that us as committee members, and along the same lines of us preparing and discussing a unified budget with the entire community, because it is an entire town, no matter how volatile things have been. We need to make sure that we're delivering accurate information and that it's the same information, because then people are all on the same page rather than saying, I heard this from Laura, or I heard this from Samantha, or Richard told me this. Then it's the same information that they're getting, and they get to be a part of their community involvement rather than feeling like an outsider or feeling like they don't have the skills to be part of it.
Kelly, go ahead, then Brian.
I just want to speak to the master plan process just a little bit. So it's owned and operated by the planning board. And they do, so similar to what Samantha was saying, they do a lot of community input sessions. The last time they did it, they were at Pumpkin Regatta, they were doing surveys, they were doing all kinds of stuff. And unfortunately just got minimal participation, I'm sure. As a planning board member now, Brian, I hope that you can, try to push that forward if you think it needs a refresh. But to that point, that's like the long-term plan for the community. I think it's hard when we talk about the difference between like deliberative and budget presentation, because that's the time to present for the next year. So it's difficult to have long-term conversations with the community at those times when we're trying to promote the next year's budget, and that's more of like a current snapshot and the next year. So I do really appreciate these conversations, and I think that as we talk about different ways that we can engage community members, like we've talked a lot about our communication over the past, as long as I've been on the board, 8 years, how to engage more people, but just historically we don't get much participation. So I think for this committee, if that's something that you guys want to take on like in the summer, like community engagement stuff, when it's like our downtime, maybe that's appropriate, but
We'll go to Glen Lake and.
yeah, I think
do
the CIP plan is kind of like that plan too, but I understand what you're saying in the same breath. It's just, it is very complex, and it does require people to take their own personal initiative to be part of that process, but it's a very complex, difficult process.
Yeah.
No matter where you stand in that process. So I think we should keep trying to come up with ideas, but I think to harness something like that, should probably start with the planning board. And to Jared's comment, if there was a time when they did school and town together, great, let's get that going, and suggest that to happen. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of make that separation for you guys.
Okay, I think I have Brian and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, my only last comment is that, and I think Samantha mentioned it, yeah, I think, I don't want to say people are complacent, but a lot of people are not educated on a lot of different things. And the one thing I think that a lot of people don't know about that we actually have is the deliberative sessions, right? And so people didn't even know what they are when I talk to them. So I think it behooves us to engage people as we're talking to people. And I even hate to say this, like we just came off election cycle, we did a lot of canvassing and door knocking, but sometimes I think we have to go to people to engage them and talk to them about getting involved, and it's up to them and their willingness to get involved. But a lot of people are not educated about what's happening until they see this new expropriation out of the blue because they're not educated, and then they're going to shoot it down because they're hurting or they don't see the value. So I think there has to be other creative ways to go to people and educate them and get their feedback. So, yeah, because without that, it's going to be hard to pass some bigger projects, especially in this present financial climate, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my final comment, we're kind of talking about two different things here. They're related, but I mean, one is getting community involvement, which I'm all for. But the other one is really, as governing bodies, committing to a plan, to something that we publicly broadcast and we start saving for. I mean, I was really struck. I talked to Danielle, I don't know, like a week ago, and she was saying most communities have like, what, 30-some CRFs? Maybe we need to look at that. And because we do need to start saving. I mean, this town and this history, I looked back, we hardly ever pass bonds for more than like $2 million, 2 or 3, and it's almost always for the road plan when we do it. Now we're looking at building costs of $30 million, $50 million. I don't see how we're ever going to talk people into that unless we start saving, we start using aggressively impact fees, and maybe there needs to be a change in state law about when those expire. And we tell people in advance, this is what we're doing, so we're not gonna do something else, because everything's gonna go to this commitment. And I agree with you, you can't wait even to deliberative or town meeting, because it's just this year, and it just feels too unplanned.
And to speak to that, one of the suggestions on the state level was to extend the impact fee over a number of more longer years, so that it was a less of a hit on developer, and then the town could rely on the funding stream for like a longer period of time.
Right,
So that was
6
something that we
years-
are exploring.
Right, you'd have to be ready to go at 6 years. You'd have to have multiple projects all come to fruition at the same time with plans ready to go to use those fees really efficiently. And
I
it
had
just,
one to
it
go-
just doesn't make sense.
And just within 6 months, prices are fluctuating so
Right.
much, it's impossible.
And I agree with Frank that, you're not gonna know how much it's gonna cost until you are there, but you can start saving and get ready for it. And I really think that's the way to go. And I don't see any other way to move forward, frankly, on these big issues.
I'm gonna let Peter jump in, then Lauren.
I want to thank you first and foremost, because I think in part, Elizabeth, part of your request is why we're having this conversation right now. And I'm just trying to think, in the end, the first thing that came up when we first started talking about this kind of overall more long-term conversation was, well, what is our role as budget committee, right? What is our role? Well, this is the role of everyone else. The thing that I liked, I'm going to use an example that I liked that I felt we did as a budget committee when it came to the school CRF, was that I felt, I'm trying to remember who else, it was just,
It was you and me.
about 4 of us
Kelly,
were
yeah.
there. I felt like we challenged the school district on budget planning that they were doing that we didn't like at that time, right? We did not like, I hate to say, I say it over and over again, we did not like Christmas in July, right? But we said, we really want to support you, right? We want to support planning, is what we kind of figured out. We want to support forward-thinking, planning for the future, not just getting all of our expenses ballooned out. But if we're going to support you, we want to see some differences in how we're getting proposals. So I'm hearing like, we want good plans, we want good leadership. So who are the people that are presenting to us that have to, I guess, make us feel good at the end of the day and get our stamp of approval? Well, that is our select board, our school board, and our department heads, right? So maybe we don't do this for this year per se, but hopefully we have this in our mind, like, how are we presenting ourselves to these, right, department heads, school board, select board, that it's like, when you come here, we're going to want to hear this, this, and this from you, right, in terms of your planning, because we don't want to have these balloon payments or whatever. What do we do for a tool for that, right? Is there a communication that we need to be putting out year to year? Does it mean we need to be meeting sometime in the spring in the future so that we're saying, hey, this is the game plan. This is what we want from you when you come to present to us, right? Don't come to us if you don't have a plan, right? We just don't want to hear it. It's not going to get our support, because I'm not going to be able to go and talk to my neighbor and tell him, come out and vote for this, which I should do, right? If I'm voting for a budget here, I should be able to go and talk to my neighbor and tell him why to support this, right? So what does that look like? I'm actually asking that to everyone else here who think about it. What is the ask that we're making of those 3 entities?
And the state RSA gives us the ability to request the budget, request like, in any form we want it. So if there's a different way that maybe in the future works better, we have the right of as a committee to request however. So you are right, if it's not working this way, maybe there's a different way that we can move forward with the budget planning.
I think that's where we can have impact. We're talking about this, we know that we don't get to decide 5 years from now as budget committee. That's not what we do. But we do get to decide how we support everything that is requested of us.
Does anybody else have anything to add on this stuff?
I have one final kind of
Go ahead,
comment
Laura.
question. I think one thing that's gonna be helpful is I know we hadn't been proceeding correctly in the past where we weren't answering questions that were being asked when public could do that. So I think this year, now that we know that that's something we're gonna do, I think that's actually really great that we can move forward doing that. My last question is, so any workshop I've done or anything when it comes to budget committee, town budget, et cetera, so the budgets are presented, they become the work of the budget committee, and then the budget committee presents it. Why don't we, as the budget committee, like it would be Joe, for example, present it? Why don't we do it like that? I'm not sure who I'm asking, someone who might know.
When did we stop doing that?
No, typically I gave the responsibility to I think Jared, you presented the town side, the school side last year.
So this is usually the deliberative session where we talk about it. So, it would be Kelly's board and my board that would present our individuals. And the reason why, I think in the past, I'm going to speak for myself, I think the reason why the school board's done it, not the budget committee, because the school board is the subject matter experts and is able to talk about some of those things. But as this board has done before, you're in the audience. We do expect the, people from this board to get up and speak and talk about that. But I think from a presentation standpoint, that's why those individual boards did it.
Sure.
It's typically also put together by Derek and Scott. So like the staff support there, that they're also there to assist with us. But this year, if you want to break it up where like, Laura, you discussed Bartlett and Glen Lake and the improvements and everything. Like if you want to break it up where each member of the committee kind of has the ownership over a certain part of the budget, then we can kind of move forward,
I don't,
more united.
can I do
Yeah,
a follow-up?
go ahead.
I wasn't saying one is necessarily better or worse, or we should. I was just curious because I know a lot of towns it works very differently, and the budget committee does present. I don't know if it's always the school, with the school so much. The school, I think, does tend to present their own, but as far as town, because it is similar yet different, I feel. So yeah, I was just curious about the reasoning, but it would completely make sense that it's just because the expert questions are gonna come out, and who better to answer, than people that have been doing this stuff.
Go
I
ahead.
just
Deep
have-
dives.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I just have one last question. So I know this is off subject, but I know like at the school board meetings, when public comment happens, that it's just their comment, they don't answer. So in the event we did have public comment, would we be answering, or is it just strictly they're saying their, you know what I mean, like at a budget meeting?
Go ahead.
So in the RSA, it is just public comment. It's not a question and answer portion, but the chair can make the distinction to respond or engage with that person and have full board discussion, but it's up to them if they want to do that or
So
not.
is that the same thing for public hearing as well? Because I know there was confusion
No.
last year.
No, I would say, sorry, a public hearing is really a time for questions, and speaking for the town, you will have the department heads there
Right.
that can provide the answer. I don't think the department heads would expect the budget committee to necessarily be ready, but I don't think I think it is appropriate
For
that
a
if somebody has a
response.
question, not just, I'm not in favor of this, but if they actually have a question, the town department heads will be there to answer it.
Okay, thank you.
And I think if anybody came in for public comment and had a legitimate question about a budgetary item, something that like, not like safety at the high school, like that belongs in the school board, but like something has to do legitimately with the budget or what we talked about the last meeting, I would feel comfortable answering the question or having somebody else answer it,
Okay, thank you.
so.
I just want
Go
to
ahead,
say
Jen.
one more thing. Two, I was thinking a little bit more about what Elizabeth said about CRF, and I can just speak from my understanding is that the CRFs that we have in town voted on to have deposits into were for things that were gonna be expensive items. The risk, and I'm just saying this out loud as we all kind of think about this year, the risk is that if you make a donation into a capital reserve fund and it's not in your budget, you then lose the ability to do that. So let's say let me think of something. Cruisers, if we had a CRF for cruisers and they were on a rotation cycle for 3 years and we didn't make the deposit for 3 times, then it's not in the budget anymore, so then we fail to be able to buy police cars. That's an example. It's not necessarily reality, but you have to think about that risk of what it is if you're saving versus removing it from the budget to fund it from a capital reserve fund. Like, all of those things kind of come into play when we talk about creating CRFs, and then also with the languages for the use of that CRF. So, if the budget committee, I think it would be helpful for things like that, that maybe the select board or the school board hasn't thought about, if you guys can just be conscious of that and maybe make recommendations to myself or Jared for things that we could propose to create. I think that would be good discussion for saving purposes, but just keep in mind that restriction that it can unintentionally create if it's not like worked appropriately.
So I didn't mean for like police vehicles. I mean,
I know,
that's
that was
an
a-
operating expense. I did mean for big projects. And the other advantage to them is when grants come up, if you've got money tucked in your CRF, that's proof of community commitment, and it's your match, and
Yep.
you're ready to go.
Yep.
So.
No, I was just using that
yeah,
as an example. I knew
I
that.
only meant it for big building projects.
Okay, I'm gonna let, so we kind of skipped around a little bit. We had a comment about the debt schedule and tax effort, but I'm gonna let Derek and Danielle, I think they were ready to say a couple things about default budget review and the process discussion. And then I have something for the budget committee to consider after that. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought it was my understanding budget process discussion and default budget review for 2024 was more the issues that Elizabeth was bringing up. And I don't know if you've discussed that already.
I don't think I asked about the default budget, but I was kind of touching on what Kelly had mentioned earlier tonight in her public comment about, I hate to break it to you guys, you had 2 failed budgets last year, and they both failed over your overwhelming recommendation. That's a problem. I think this committee needs to discuss it, because clearly, somewhere, this committee has lost the confidence of the voters, because they didn't vote that way, and you had 2 failed budgets. I don't think any of us want to spend all these hours here for the next 6 to 8 weeks for failed budgets. So I think it would be productive if the committee had a discussion about what do you think went wrong, what do you think needs to go right, and what we can do to get the confidence of the voters back.
Go ahead, Frank.
I would just say, I don't think it's a confidence issue in the budget committee. I think that last year, if you look at the series of events that brought us to inflation, the price of goods and services rising, the squeeze coming on average families, I think that likely was the primary reason why people tightened up and said, wait a minute, we don't want our taxes going up any more than we have to also. That's just my personal opinion. I don't see rampant, distrust of the budget committee out there. So I think it was more a circumstance that brought us to that. Just my opinion. Laura?
So even if that is the case, because that has a huge part to do with it, of course, we didn't do our job very well then, because there were a lot of times where we moved on quickly, no one had any questions. People proposed cuts, but they were like for $1,000 from postage. Like, we need to do our job if we see people out there and, with 2 failed budgets, and we put forth a budget, even if it's overwhelmingly recommended, if nobody tried to make any big cuts that were like, we were able to do like contracted things we can't cut, obviously, but we need to do that work here out loud for the people. So then when it gets to later on and it's deliberative, it's everything, it's not all of a sudden hugely undercut, because that means we haven't done our job, even if the reason is like everyone's really strapped. We know that, we live here too, and we feel that. So if people want to make cuts, like, talk about them when we're here as a group and when we have the department heads, and question them more, because that's the only way we're going to put forth a budget that will pass. And that's what the goal should be, is to put forth a budget that will pass. So we need to do all that work ourselves.
Peter, did you have something?
Yeah, Frank, I have to also speak to that, like, the circumstances you're describing didn't happen in March when we voted, right, on these budgets. Those circumstances we were well aware of those economic circumstances before. And they're twofold, right? There's the pressure on households, and then there's the pressure on towns and municipalities in terms of the expenses of continuing to provide the operations that we have essentially said, okay, these are the operations we provide, right? So, I mean, it has to be one or the other, and both, between we're saying, this stinks, I don't want to present this to you, but let me tell you why we gotta pay for this. Or, we're sitting at this table and we're saying, I wish we could have it, but I don't think I can present this to my friend. I don't think I can say to my neighbor, in this year, we can have this. Even though I think it's the right thing, department heads are doing their job, they're presenting, they're being meticulous, it's just not right for right now. That's exactly what has to happen here. We either have to say what hard conversation we're gonna have with our neighbor, or what hard conversation we have to have with our department heads. But we have to have both, and I think, I'd love to see us all on the same page come March, and that we're all saying unanimously, this is something that I can both say, yeah, we've said to department heads, sorry, can't have it, and we're also gonna be willing to say to our neighbors, I think we gotta pay for this. I know it stinks, but this is what's going on.
Jared?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I love what Peter just said, and I just want to add on to that. This board, I always thought, is making sure that we're spending the money in the right way. We're spending it on the right things. This board should not be about cutting things. We should be interrogating things, absolutely. I know I do it as part of my regular process. I'm sure Kelly does it as part of her regular process, and then it gets to this board. And I think that we have to ensure that we're spending the right money on the right things and call those things out. So I don't want to just say, well, we should be cutting things. That's inappropriate. It's making sure that we're spending the right things on on the scope of work that's needed to support the town. So I agree with Peter on what he said.
I think, I just want to jump in, I think addressing kind of an elephant in the room, like, there was a petition warrant article that came up proposing a percentage of a tax cap, and then the public at deliberative changed it to this arbitrary number, like there's gonna be no tax cap, and I think part of the public sentiment from a sizable group of people, and a lot of those people, I would say all of them voted in town meeting, they just wanted a negotiation, like how high are we gonna go on a budget? Like how responsible are we gonna keep us living within our means? Like, not 35%, but maybe we could have been like, as a budget committee or a public, we've been like, you know what about 7%? What about 5%? I think part of it is a lot of the public was irritated that there was like no coming to the table about how high and what percentage we're spending. I think everybody understands that the budget's gonna go up, taxes are gonna go up. I think like having the stability of how much every year and knowing that there's going to be a ceiling, I think was an important part. And I think that, I don't know, I mean, that was probably part of the reason why we had two failed budgets.
And that's part of what I was getting at before, is you look at how many
After.
budgets in the state of New Hampshire did not pass? Just about everybody. So when you look at the recipe, or if you try to figure out where could we have done better? What went wrong? A big part of that, the entire state and large portions of the country didn't pass their budget.
Laura, go ahead.
First of all, that's not true. I don't know where you got that fact, if you have a number of how many places passed their budget and how many didn't, but look into that before you say something so strong like that. Second of all, I want to clarify, I didn't mean that I think we should sit here and cut everything. I was just saying, because there are people who sat at this table and presented a budget, whether you voted for it or not, then you also voted for a tax cap. So if you are going to do that, make cuts that are transparent to the public so they know exactly where you stand. That's what's with that. The second thing about that, and I wasn't even thinking that that was a topic that we needed to discuss tonight, but since you brought it up, there's a difference between suggesting a tax cap of 2.5 The only way to counteract that, if people didn't want it, was to propose a super high tax cap. Not because, and I think I said this as did others at that meeting, nobody said they want our taxes to go up 30%. I know that was said all over social media and within the public, but that is not what that meant. That meant that we need to have the budget committee, the school board, and the select board do their jobs, as well as the department heads, and we need to trust that we as a budget committee, school board, et cetera, are saying exactly what Jared said, which is that we have discussed, and this is the best use of the public's money. That 30% tax cap thing is nonsense, because nobody in that room meant they were gonna raise taxes 30%. That was because we didn't want a tax cap. Or we did, and we wanted to be 2.5. That was the only way to get around the tax cap at that meeting. I just want to make that clear. I don't want to keep spreading that information that a certain group of people or a certain side or whatever want to raise taxes up to 30%. That is nonsense. And I hope everyone sitting at this table understands that that's not what that was. And especially as budget committee members, you should know that we will never put forth a budget that raises taxes 30%.
Go ahead, Kelly.
So, well, all right, I just want to go back. That was essentially kind of what, Jared's laughing at me, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm smiling, I'm agreeing with you.
Regardless of what happened or why that happened, that's why, and now that I could talk a little bit better than when I read that tonight, which I'll email it to all of you anyways, just so, well, I'll email it to Danielle if you want to everybody. That's the whole reason that I brought that up, and it was not to discredit the conversation at all, but I believe that if you are a person who is of the strong volition that that should be in place, granted, we could talk about the whole thing about as an SB2 town, how a tax cap completely makes the budget committee irrelevant, that's another whole thing. But if you think that the increase should be only 2.5%, I'm down for it. Like, let's talk about it, but doing the work here is the important part. So to Peter's point, I want everyone to vote on the budget and say, yes, we all agree to this because we've done the work. It is one thing completely if you've made a recommendation and it gets voted down. Then feel free to share that with people that you've talked about that. But doing the work here is the important part. If you think that there's services that we have that we don't need, bring it up. Let's talk about it. There is not one person in this room who's going to be like, actually, no, I don't want to save us any money. And that was the purpose of what I said tonight, was to encourage all of you to have the voice in what we do, because this process is really important. And the work that Jared and I do beforehand with our committees to bring it here, the ball is in our court as far as what we propose to the public. And I'm happy that we're having this conversation in this way, but regardless of what happened last year, I think that it doesn't matter moving forward. Those are the kind of conversations that we can have, whether it's a percentage across the board or whatever. Like, let's talk about those things.
Brian?
I think my last comment is to this subject is I think, or I anticipate we're going to have those conversations in our deliberative sessions once all the department heads present to us. But I know for me, my constituents, they want less spending, they're lower taxes. So how we get to that point is part of our deliberations and discussions. So, and for me, the only two ways of doing that, and I hate to say it, is either you cut services or you cut payroll. Only way significantly you can change things. So to me, as we get the presentations, we kind of wrestle with that, we'll deliberate, but to me, people that kind of voted me in, they're asking for less spend, lower taxes because they're hurting still, and they're anticipating this coming year to be hit again at a higher rate, and they're already strapped. So how do we wrestle with that? So
I think already that's progress. I mean, I already see it in this discussion between everybody. And I think that discussion that Brian just mentioned has to be had. But that in itself is progress, because if we can move beyond this sort of narrative that, oh, the government is so bloated, we can do whatever, and it's, we can cut everything, and it's not going to affect anything in your services. That is the danger, because we know that's not true. We've all just been through this and seen these tours, and we're going to go through these budgets line by line. And if that were true, then we really aren't doing our jobs. So, I mean, that message, I think, is an important one to get out there to people and say, well, we've done everything we can. This is kind of going back to what Jared said, right? Our job is to make sure people are getting the best bang for their buck. And to make those decisions, if we have to make those decisions, then we have to make those decisions.
Peter, did you have something, or Olivia? Somebody had something over there.
I think we both did. I think back to town meetings and stuff and us being a unified committee as well, I don't think we appeared as that at the town meetings. I think a lot of people got up. I think everybody in that room was really heated, and I think a lot of people in this room were kind of fighting with each other at microphones, which wasn't helpful for anyone, and I think it confused the public even more. So like Kelly said, like Brian said, like everyone in this room has said, we need to do the work here, and we need to go out there together and share accurate information about what our role is as budget committee members and what we can do to affect the budget. Because just promising people that, oh, we can make these slashes, we can lower taxes, we can do this, that's not always accurate. And it's not always helpful when people are already struggling to sort out how to make their lives less hard. Because at this point, I think no matter whether we're sitting here or whether we're somewhere out there, everybody's having a hard time, and it's our job to make it just a little bit less hard by giving them truthful and accurate information.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything? Peter?
Kelly, I remember there was a bit of a conversation at DPW, our tour, where I brought up to Adam, the department head there, that I felt like what I was seeing out of how we approached the default budget this year, at least that this is how, and I think you brought up some very good points after that, but how I felt we were approaching that default budget was we essentially were, in some ways, kicking the can to future taxpayers on how we did a lot of things. And I don't know if that, basically, essentially, an example people, it's easier to bring up is trash collection, right? The trash collection idea, it's like, okay, we want our taxes lower, you also have trash collection that you don't have to pay for, whereas many other communities either don't have it or have to pay for it. So we're like, okay, do we want to lower our taxes so we cut trash collection? And I think, if I remember correctly, the idea is, okay, I'm like, okay, let's cut trash collection for a year. Let's just do it. And there's been figures of what that would save us, but the reality is you cut trash collection, where do you have to cut those out, right? You literally have to cut employees that are doing other things for you in the town, and you're losing capacity as a town. So it's not an easy argument. But what is hard, and a hard argument for me, is if we're saying, like, to our neighbors, and I'm going to speak to what you're saying, Brian, is like, they're saying we want to pay less in taxes. I want to hear what they're going to tell us we want less of too, and we're not going to pay for. Not as a challenge to them, but so that we can actually figure out how we can do that, right? How can we actually do that? Right? Because if things cost so much, we can't, no one at this table is going to change how much things cost.
Right.
So we have to change what we're getting. And it's not, the last part of this is that I don't think we're doing a service to future Goffstonians. I know maybe that's not our role, I don't know, but by basically cutting taxes every year or trying to pay as little as we can, but also still having our services, right? Having our cake and eating it too, that's not fair to future taxpayers and future residents, because they're gonna get that balloon payment in 10 years when we finally do pay for the thing that everybody wanted all to and they weren't willing to give up. So I want to hear it. What are we willing to give up? Or what are we paying too much for?
Well, I think they're interconnected. I think there's the here and now, right? Where us as a committee, we have to deliberate and figure out, okay, are these budgets lean? Are they necessary? Are we extracting value? Are we getting good outcomes? That's one thing, but also tied back to what Kelly mentioned about the master plan, what does the future hold? What are the bigger projects? And get the community involved or solicit their feedback to get involved. It's not an easy conversation, but I think that's important to have because my heart goes out to seniors that are on a fixed income. They can't sustain the paying out of taxes, even though there's some tax breaks, which is nominal. Like, I'm a big fan. I'm not going to solicit the representatives to put together like a tax cap for seniors that have lived in the community for X amount of years. Because I think other states do that, and I think it's appropriate. But you shouldn't, if you're on a fixed income, you shouldn't be able to absorb a 7% or 10% increase in your taxes. You just can't budget for that. So to me, I want to see more stability in leaner budgets, and for us to feel more confident, or at least for me, feel more confident to tell my neighbors, my friends, yeah, you're getting value, you're getting good outcomes based upon the budgets. And I know last year, back to your comment, Olivia, I think it was a little contentious, and I'm not, numbers and budget shouldn't be partisan. It should not be. Yes, we have our philosophies or ideologies, but at the end of the day, we all live in the same community, and we want value out of everything we get. And how we get there might be different, but I think we can work together to get there. But again, going back to my comment earlier, is that people are hurting, and they're expecting me to have those conversations, have those dialogues to try to reduce taxes as much as possible, because again, they can't absorb another 7% increase or 10% increase. They'll be forced to sell and move, and that's disheartening to me if they've been in the community for 40 years. Or they might live in a home that's generational, it's a big home, and be forced to sell it because they're at an age where they need to downsize. And to me, that's a terrible argument. If it's an emotional home, it's a generational home, they should not be forced to sell based upon local taxes, period. So.
Okay, I think this was productive. I think we can move forward and hopefully, we're gonna have some hard conversations moving forward. I know
Yeah.
there's a number of things I'd like to look at, but I think everybody has their things that they'd like to look at in the budget. So I think it's productive, and I just think hearing each other out is the first way we start. So we'll see how it goes, but I wanted to, with that being
Before we get
said.
to there, you have one more thing on the agenda, the tax effort history. Can I suggest
Go
that we table that until the town starts their presentation? Because I know I'd asked you guys for some information about taxes. I mean, I do think it's important to look about what the increase has been. I totally get your point, Brian. I don't think we ever have 7 to 10% tax increases in a year. I hope not.
We have before.
So
Yes.
you have this information at tab 7 of
Okay.
it, back to 2006.
Okay, so maybe we could, I know you want to get to the unassigned fund balance, and that's fine, but maybe that's a discussion we could have when we start to look at the town budget or that side, and table that for right now.
Okay. Yep.
That was my suggestion. I just don't want to get lost.
All right, so I've been wanting to put this together for a couple of years. I think it's a very important thing. I think a lot of voters and a lot of people that I speak to are very concerned about, not concerned, but more confused about some of the language and how it appears on the warrant articles on the ballot. So the Budget Committee doesn't have purview over the drafting of the warrant articles. We also have to follow narrow DRA recommendations on the warrant article language. But I kind of wanted to throw this out here of sending a resolution, a Budget Committee resolution to the Select Board and School Board that basically says that we recommend the governing bodies only use warrant article language that identifies the funding source for the appropriation articles. So the governing body should refrain from identifying unassigned fund balance as not being raised by taxation. Because it's my belief that using the unassigned fund balance is directly related to taxation because the unassigned fund balance is what is left over from overtaxing. So I would like to see us kind of taking a step to be more, I hate using transparent, I feel like I use it all the time, but transparent to voters so that they understand, like, if you vote against this, your you'll get that money back next year. But if you vote for this, this is a critical project for the town, and, you know, like, I'd like to at least give the recommendation to the school board and the select board, but I wanted to solicit feedback from members and, see how it goes. So Sam, I haven't heard from you in a while.
Would you,
I'm trying.
would you
Oh, wow.
be opposed to putting the word like not be raised by new taxation? Because unassigned fund balance, yes, it is money that is raised by taxes, it is money that is left over, but I think I also hate the idea that like, oh, if you don't vote for this, you get the money back at the end of the year, because you don't, none of us get a check, right? And I think it, like, I like the idea of it being raised by new taxation, as opposed to just taxation.
I understand. I don't think that's allowed in the RSA to say that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you can change some of the language. I guess
I'm looking at
what I
your-
would want to scratch from the warrant article language is the last thing that says not being raised back taxation. It's okay to say should.
Right, and I wanted to say not be
unassigned-
raised by
This comes
new
from the unassigned
taxation.
fund balance.
Wait, can I
That's
ask a
not
point of
any-
clarification? Is it true that if the warrant article is defeated, that the money automatically goes back to your tax rate? Doesn't it go back into the unassigned fund balance?
There are three ways to use fund balance. It is at town meeting, it would be a warrant article. The governing body, the select board, can use it to reduce taxes, and there's an emergency. What's that?
On the
On the
municipal.
municipal portion. And then there's an emergency procedure that the town can enact if there's an emergency.
But if the warrant article fails,
It
it
stays
stays in the unassigned fund
it
balance
stays
until the
in fund
select board
balance.
takes action.
But there's only a specified amount that they can hold, and there's a recommended amount, and I think they almost hit the 12%, right? That was the goal, or you want to get to
We're-
16%?
We're over the 12, but there is what's
Right.
what's
You-
16 at
The
right
select
now?
board has a policy following the Government Finance Officers Association, the national recommendation, they have a target of 16%.
And
When we
with our-
set tax rate last week, it was at 12.01%.
Do you remember with the reval what the 16% the number would be? I can't remember.
That information is in your packet at tab 6. So there are articles about what fund balance is, how it can be used. There is a copy of the select board's fund balance policy that was updated in '22. And there is a history of use at both town meeting and at tax rate setting by the select board.
It's just to say the difference was a lot, so to get to 16%, I can't remember the amount, but it's quite a bit to get to 16%.
So this is one of those things that I think we need to be really clear about when we're talking to people. If they vote down the warrant article, that money is not necessarily going to lower their taxes. Because it isn't a straight one-for-one deal. It's more complicated than that.
Unless they're at the 16, and unless they've hit the cap of legally how much they can hang on to.
When that happens, then you can say that.
There is
I mean,
get to that
there's a recommended cap by DRA, which is 17%. That is a recommendation.
Okay, Jared and then Laura.
I just want to make a point of clarification. That's for the town side. The school board cannot do that. The school board must return an unreserved fund balance other than what's been appropriated for warrant articles back to the town. So even though we're talking specifically, town can hold on to it, the school board cannot. So if we have an overcollection of revenue, that goes back to the town to give back for offset taxes. If we have an underspend of our budget, that's part of the unreserved fund balance. Whatever we aren't allowed to hold from warrant articles must be given back to the town to be offsetting taxes. So it's very true that the town can hold a healthy unreserved fund balance, but the school cannot. We must return that money back at the end of our fiscal year.
After you've moved money into your CRF, doesn't the CRF funds come out of that?
Are you talking about contingency fund?
I can't
They
keep
can
them
hang on to
straight.
5% for contingency, right? 5?
So we can vote, so when there's an unreserved fund balance, we can hold up to, the RSA says we can hold up to 5% in an emergency fund.
Okay.
Our policy has been that we don't expend that unless if it's a true emergency. We do ask the town legislative body, the voters, to hold on to a certain portion of that for our CRF and put it in our CRF. We've been blessed that we've been able to do that for the past number of years.
Okay.
And I think, Danielle, we just talked about this, so the 12% would cover approximately 2 months?
Not even.
Okay, thank you. Can you explain that portion? Since I
So
don't have it.
the select board's target of 16% is based on the fact that 2 months out of a 12-month period, as a percentage, 2 divided by 12 is 16.67%. So they're targeting 16 as a round number. The GFOA's minimum recommendation is 2 months' worth in the unassigned fund balance. To give an example, the 12% minimum that the select board retained at this tax rate setting was just over 7.5 million. The 16% would be about another 3 million on top of that. And when you think about why that is and how that works, the town has to transfer funding to the school on a monthly basis, and that averages between $4 and $5 million every single month. So if the town had $7.5 million on a balance sheet, that wouldn't even cover 2 months of the school's operations, let alone the town's operations during that same period. Unassigned fund balance, I know we've all had this discussion before, is not just cash in the bank. So it is just a snapshot in time as of a balance sheet. It includes money that is owed to the town. So there's a lot of moving parts as we calculate everything. But unassigned fund balance is calculated as of the end of the prior year and the audited figures of what is in that balance sheet account. So it is comprised of multiple things. So there's the amount that was perhaps underspent if an appropriation was made and we didn't use the full amount. It also includes additional revenues we weren't expecting. Maybe there was more motor vehicle registrations, or the bank interest rate was higher and the money that was in the town's bank account earned more. Maybe there was more fees collected for building permits or other types of fees. And then additionally, you have factors like the grants that may come in, unanticipated grants that can offset something that was originally proposed to be collected through taxation. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, and that's why they take a snapshot at the end of the year of what we had after you consider all of those different components, and then that number is carried forward for consideration the next year. As Jared indicated, the school proposes an article, for their CRF or something. That's the same as what the town does when they propose either a deposit into a CRF from an unassigned fund balance or a project to be funded from an unassigned fund balance if possible. We don't have a general CRF for our CIP projects, so our CIP projects are individually laid out in every single budget year.
Go ahead, Laura.
I'm glad you brought this to the conversation because I think those words are confusing. The wording is confusing, and it's almost deceiving unintentionally, no matter how it's written, because of course it is taxation, yes. And that I do 100% agree with Samantha, it's not new taxation. Because I wouldn't, like everyone kind of led to, I wouldn't want to confuse people in thinking like that is 100% going to lower things or they're getting anything back, because although that's sometimes the case, it's not like anyone's going to see a check or a huge reduction. So I really like the new taxation, and I have seen that used in other municipalities and.
Are we able to do that?
We would need to run it by DRA, but we're pretty certain that we would be able to
So-
use
So the
that.
DRA
language.
says that language is not required. It's parenthetical language, it's a parenthetical remark.
But we could
So
add it.
not required, there's not required language, but then there is additional language. Sometimes they will say, you can't add that language. So we need to make sure that it's permissible.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that would be
No, I-
my point.
If I'm understanding this correctly, I'm in favor of this too, because I think for me, and I had many conversations with Danielle about this, because I think initially it wasn't intentional, but I think the language, current language is very misleading in regards to how it's written. Because I think if I was an average Joe out there, like, oh, it's not raised through taxation, I'm thinking, okay,
It's free.
it's, well, it's free, or they might think the town is, yes, we collect revenue, but we're not for profit, so they might think, well, it's coming from a different revenue source. That's not the case. So I think we want to educate and be more, not, transparent, but clear and more precise in how this money is, how it's going to be, appropriated. So, yeah, I'm in favor of this, because I think people should know what they're really, really signing up for, for or against.
And at the end of the day, this is just a budget committee recommendation to the two governing bodies.
Yes,
So
yeah.
Kelly and Jared can, if this passes, they can go to their respective committees and say, the budget committee has talked about this. This is something we'd really like to look into for this year. So that's why I wanted to bring it forward. I think it's been something bugging me for years, but who else has something? Peter and then Danielle. I think,
Can I just go real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
It might answer some of those questions. I just want to also note that, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. We talk about this literally every single year. That in support of the DRA language, which is often unintentionally or whatever you think confusing, that we often point people to the voter's guide that gives a more in-depth explanation of these processes. So I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not opposed to this, talking about the language, but just keeping in mind that there is for town and school, we always provide that additional, like, where we can say it in English, for lack of a better term. So just keep in mind that the supplementary stuff, it is followed, and that's another place where we can add context to this kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Go, Peter.
So it's actually a question. So Joe, have we used any other type of formal recommendations in the past few years? Is this the first time I don't know if I've seen.
I haven't, no, I
Not
haven't
last year.
seen it.
Not that I remember.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we can do it informal. Kelly and Jared
No,
can bring it up,
no,
or
the-
I mean, what were you thinking?
sorry, the reason I'm bringing it up is because, like, I was literally, when I was doing my little soapbox speech earlier, I like my soapbox. I mean, I'm trying to think, what are our tools that we have? And I have to commend you. I think this is kind of, I think the word you were, precise, accurate was the word I'd be more interested in. It's like, that's what I am looking for as well. We've always argued over this, but this is our tool as well. You're also bringing an example of the tool that we get to utilize with our department heads and our two governing bodies that we work with. This is giving them advance notice, like, this is what we care about this year, so to speak. So, thank you. Like, I don't know about the exact language because I've always questioned it, and I'm happy that Laura has brought up, like, oh, other communities are doing this. I personally wouldn't be prepared to recommend it yet tonight without learning a little bit more. So I kind of have just some questions, but I think this is a great tool. This is the type of tool that we should be accessing more often. So, thank you.
Can
Kelly.
I ask, can we just wait to hear back first if that's in line with DRA before can we just table it until Derek
Yeah,
and Danielle
sure.
can get us
I
an
mean, we
answer?
have, that's great. So we have a meeting on 11/12, so we can put that on the agenda as one of our items, maybe after, we're deliberating on budget too.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll go light on deliberations that day and then be able to talk about this too. We'll see how many pages where we want to stop, but go ahead.
You still definitely have time. The warrant articles aren't set in stone until January. So there is quite a bit of time for the committee to come up with what you want your recommendation to be and give that back to the select board and school board as well as the water precinct. So before, the point that I just wanted to raise was that the governing bodies that are impacted by this are all 4 entities. The water precincts do, they're self-sufficient, so, but they do hold a fund balance. So it is, of value just to note that all of these recommendations would also be shared with all 4 of the governing bodies, and that governing bodies do include all 4 entities.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
That slipped
I
my mind, too.
apologize.
That slipped my mind, I'm sorry.
I feel like I'm like, oh no, I really need to go out.
Go ahead, Jared.
As a member of a board that's feeding into this one, I don't want to wait till January, because that's going to cause problems with my board kicking this and understanding and saying, oh, now we are pressed for time, we can't have the appropriate conversation for it. So I would like to have the idea, if we could have this sooner rather than later, on what your research has been, if you're just taking that up, because I know that we have a motion for you to do that. But I wouldn't wait till January for that discussion to happen here, if we're trying to be proactive and have the feeder boards have that discussion first. My general question I would have to this board, though, as a representative of the school board, so what? We listened to you for your recommendation? Oh, no, we're going to still go with what we want. What's going to be the penalty for that? That's a question I want to
That's a
ask.
conversation we also have to have. We don't want to like shove you up against a wall, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Well,
So
if this is one of those things, and I want to be honest to carry on for a moment, if I say, I shouldn't say if we say, that's nice, we're going to recommend what we want, does that mean that you're going to reject it and vote to not recommend it 15-0 or 13-2? Because that's the teeth that this board kind of was looking for. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Peter all the time because I agree with him most of the time.
Are you saying you disagree with me now?
But that's something that I think Jack, who's in the audience, who's my alternate, that's something that we need to understand to say, are you really serious about this, or is this a directional thing that you'd like to have? So,
Well, I think this is also part of your responsibility as a member of this board to be like, they're really serious about this. We work together for the betterment of the community. This is what the budget committee really would like to see from the governing bodies. And I mean, we don't have to start with teeth. We can just go in and be like, can you please do this, And we're all on the same team trying to better the town, so
Can
I
I
hope they
just
go along with it. Go
clarify?
ahead.
Jared, so are you saying basically like, we could spend all this time on this and you take it back as a recommendation and they're like, nah, and then everyone wasted time? Like, I just want to make sure I can clear on your kind of like feeling.
here's my game planning. Let's play the chessboard for a moment. We do all this work, whether we do it now or we do it in January. And then my board comes back, and not say that they would, well, this is the way we've done it for 6 years. Why are we changing it? Everybody understands what we're doing. Me as an individual, I like to think that I know the process now, just like everybody else on this board. The average voter doesn't. We could send as much stuff we can put in those pamphlets to make them educated themselves. They don't read it.
Right.
And so, when, on a personal level, how I feel about this, everybody knows how I feel about it if you actually listen to a school board meeting. I'm always voting no on our CRF because it's coming from an unassigned fund balance, but I represent the school board at this board. On a personal level, I like this because it's clean. It clearly establishes to the person that I'm going to take an affirmative approach to actually vote for this. Because when I read, well, it's not raised by taxation, so I don't know where it's coming from, so I assume it's free, great. But we know that's not true. We've already said that. But I would just like us to kind of have that thought process of we're being proactive as a board, a budget committee, and we think you should do it, and here's why. And if you don't, oh, by the way, well, we might not approve what you guys approve. And I'll just hear that from the comments that we have to be able to take back.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Wow, you ever see those videos where people say something and then somebody slaps them in the face with a fish? I kind of feel like that just happened. I find that, I'm glad you asked that question, but I find it kind of chilling. And for me, it's another reflection how much work this committee has to do to restore trust in its goodwill in its faith and in coming to the table and trying to really solve problems and work with the other governing bodies. So, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I cannot imagine using my vote as a personal vendetta in that kind of way. I'd say it sounds like middle school kid behavior, but that might be doing a disservice to middle school kids. I just can't imagine that we would ever, or that any of us would say, well, that's it. If you're not going to follow our recommendation, you're done. We're not going to vote for it.
That's kind of why I wanted to clarify, because I was like, is that what we think is happening? But
yeah,
people will do that, unfortunately.
I would hope that your board would vote as your board thinks is the best thing to do. And if we have to have a big argument afterwards, then we'll have a big argument. But it's going to be in public. And it's going to be, we're going to lay our reasons out. And hopefully at the end of the day, if we all come to this with good faith, we can work something out.
Can I respond to that? Hello? And no, Elizabeth, I'm not, like I said, I'm just playing the chess game. I don't think that we would do that.
I'm glad you asked it. I don't mean any personal aspersions at all.
I know. But it's one of those things where I think this is the opportunity for thought process. And after we receive warrant articles from from the school board or from the select board, I think it's too late. I think this is an idea of us being proactive, like Peter said. And that's why I think this is good. Whether we vote on it today or we're tabling it and bring it back later, that's cool. But I like the idea that we're actually saying is, we're trying to put a vision in place as a budget committee. And now I'm looking at Elizabeth, but we're trying to actually have a vision of what we should do, because we think it's going to be cleaner for the voters to be able to approve or not approve a budget. Because that's ultimately our customers, is what are the voters going to do? We want to make it as easy as we can for them to make a decision, be informed and make a decision.
So I think what's good is we're going to have Derek and Danielle check with the DRA, make sure this new language is good. I'm okay with the new language. We can have a discussion on Tuesday, but we'll put it at the top of the agenda Tuesday. And so we can give it the time that it needs. And then depending on how long it takes, we can go through as much of the budget or as little of the budget as needed. I budgeted extra meetings just in case, so I want to make sure we do our due diligence so that, everybody feels like they've looked into everything. So other than that, I have expenditure and revenues. Again, this is just these packets, so look at them if you want to look further. We don't have to look at them right here at this meeting, but look into them. If there are big questions, glaring things about the budget or the revenues, the spending, email Catherine and Danielle, and they'll get an answer out to the whole committee for our records, so we have it.
The
email?
budget reports are attached to the back of your agenda.
Yeah,
There's a
okay.
binder
And there's
clip.
some budget reports.
It
All
includes
right, I
budget
got it.
reports from both the school and the town.
Thank you.
For year-to-date.
Okay.
We'll get you a
I'll get
copy.
one. We'll be fine.
And then I want to give an opportunity for Kelly and Jared to report on their stuff. Kelly, you want to go?
So, pretty much the select board has been focused on just working within the default budget. As I was mentioning, we cut about $1 million from the proposed budget to try and close the gap so that our presentation can be, our budget can be conservative as possible without cutting services. We are in negotiations with the IAFF, which is our firefighters union, so that's still continuing. We're actively searching to fill open positions across the departments. Staffing has been hard. And I just wanted to give a shout out. We've been talking about like all of us and our ability to make things less expensive, but I just wanted to call out someone who's really trying to do that and get creative. Brian Ray, our IT director, has been doing some work on trying to see about how we can get licenses, IT licenses for municipalities at a massive discount, similarly to how the nonprofit and school funding is, how they're given those things specifically with Microsoft. So like currently this year, we're battling like a 30% increase for some of our IT functionality. which is, you can imagine, is a hard thing to manage in a budget when you're not expecting those kind of increases. So he's really working on the state level with some IT functionalities and boards to try to see what they can do on that, which is really great. Also, the select board is working, now that the election is over, or is in the process of still working on trying to come up with some ideas for asking the county to give us some grace on our tax portion that we pay due to the amount of services that Hillsborough County utilizes from our town, so more to come on that. Not that any of those things are immediate changes or will change anything for this year, but we're trying to find ways we can impact lesser taxes. And then finally, the select board made some updates to the code of conduct. So I'm gonna pass these out. If you could pass that down, please. I think it's enough in there. Which applies to elected members. We also made some notes to include appointed members as well. So let me find the page so I can direct you. I apologize again that I have to read to you all. But on page 6, so we made these updates from the select board. We asked that all the chairs inform the committees.
Sorry, Kelly, what page?
I'm sorry, page 6. In section N, that harassment for elected and appointed officials was included. Because you all assign the code of conduct in your oath of office. It does say that you'll be aware of any changes made to the code of conduct, so we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of those changes. And then also a small language thing in the back that included, on the very last page, page 8, talks about some of the changes, the formal complaint section, and then we just also included appointed officials in a lot more of the areas.
Thank you, Kelly. Jared?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is there's a consolation game, football game going on right now for Goffstown against Dover, and I hope to be able to go to see it if we can get this meeting over. And I enjoy anybody to come see it with me.
Are you like
So,
motioning to close?
That's my close.
Okay, so for the budget committees, we included the next meeting dates. The last 3 are if needed, depending on the pace of the committee, so we can go as slow or as fast as we need to go. And I just wanted to flag these for you. Danielle also sent out a calendar that includes, the public hearing and everything in January after the new year. So you should have all those dates already, pretty much right up till town meeting. We have all of them available, so.
That's in your binder as well.
Okay.
I have one, I just put a copy of the calendars there for reference.
Wonderful. So is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, go ahead, Jared. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Elizabeth, go ahead.
so we're starting our deliberations. We will all go out like little birds in the world and tell our friends about what's happened here. And we'll all probably get on social media. Well, all right, whatever. But there's a general sort of rule, sort of one of these gentleman agreements that has been in the past that I have not seen as much on social media lately. That is, when we go out and talk about these things and post, usually you preface your comments by saying, although I am a member of the Budget Committee, I am not speaking for the Budget Committee. These are my own opinions. That every single time you post, you say that, because none of us are authorized to speak for the committee unless the committee votes that way, including Joe. He has to get our approval before he can speak for the committee. So I just want to give that little reminder to everyone. You really should include that when you do a public communication, so that it is not at all unclear about what you're doing and who you're speaking for. Now I will make a motion.
All right, motion by Elizabeth, is there a second? Second by Olivia. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, we're adjourned at
23.